The arrival and the offers. The vessel descended from the night sky without warning or fanfare, a teardrop of liquid metal that hardened as it touched the ground in the central plaza of New Montreal. No heat signature, no radiation, no communication, just silent arrival on a Tuesday evening as commuters clutched their coats against the autumn chill. Within hours, the entire planet knew. By dawn, security perimeters had been established, the Canadian military had mobilized, and the United Nations Security Council was in emergency session. News drones hovered at the edge of the restricted zone, capturing footage of the smooth, reflective craft that stood approximately 7 meters tall. Scientists monitoring the vessel reported no detectable emissions, no signs of a door or entry point, and no response to any form of attempted communication. On the morning of the third day, the craft opened. A seam appeared along its side, widening into an aperture from which emerged a single being. It stood upright on 2 legs, with proportions vaguely humanoid yet distinctly alien. Its skin, if it could be called that, shifted constantly between deep purple and midnight blue, with luminescent patterns flowing across its surface like constellations in motion. It had no visible mouth, but 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern observed the world with unnerving intelligence. The alien simply stood beside its craft, making no aggressive moves. When approached by hazmat-suited scientists, it produced a small crystalline sphere that projected universal mathematical equations, establishing its intelligence and desire for communication. Within hours, rudimentary translation became possible. The visitor identified itself only as emissary, and stated its purpose, to evaluate humanity and determine if Earth's species was worthy of the exchange. What this exchange entailed, the emissary would not specify, only that it would be transformative for humanity's future. The being requested to hear proposals from Earth's representatives, after which it would make its judgment. World leaders convened an emergency summit. The stakes seemed impossibly high, potentially first contact with an advanced civilization that could offer untold knowledge or technology. Every major nation and corporation wanted to present their case directly. Professor Emmett Reeves watched these developments from his modest apartment near Concordia University, where he taught astronomy and xenosociology, a field that had been largely theoretical until 3 days ago. At 57, Emmett's weathered face bore the lines of someone who smiled often but worried more. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, contrasting with the perpetual disarray of his curly hair. Colleagues described him as brilliant but eccentric, his office a chaos of star charts, indigenous artifacts, and vintage vinyl records. Unlike the politicians and CEOs clamoring for audience with the alien, Emmett felt no urge to rush to the containment zone. Instead, he continued teaching his classes, now focused entirely on theoretical frameworks for understanding non-terrestrial intelligence. "Our visitor isn't here by accident," he told his packed lecture hall. "An intelligence capable of interstellar travel doesn't randomly select destinations. Earth was chosen, and the question is, why?" When the university president appeared at his door with representatives from the Global Contact Committee, Emmett wasn't surprised. "They want you at the exchange presentations," President Harlow said without preamble. "Your papers on potential alien psychology have been circulating among the advisors." Emmett raised an eyebrow. "My papers are highly speculative and were mostly ridiculed by the scientific community." "Until now," the woman beside Harlow said. She introduced herself as Dr. Juniper Nakamura, xenolinguistics specialist. "Your framework for understanding non-human value systems is the most developed we have. We need observers who can interpret the emissary's responses." 48 hours later, Emmett sat in an observation room adjacent to the presentation chamber. Through one-way glass, he watched as the most powerful entities on Earth made their appeals to the silent, shimmering figure. The United North American Coalition went first, offering military alliance and shared defense technology. The emissary's patterns briefly flashed crimson before returning to their usual flow. It said nothing. The East Asian Economic Sphere presented next, offering exclusive access to Earth's most advanced quantum computing research. The alien merely tilted its head, its constellation patterns continuing their steady drift across its form. The European Federation proposed cultural exchange and philosophical discourse, emphasizing shared knowledge and mutual growth. The emissary remained motionless. The Global Corporate Consortium, representing the 12 largest multinationals, offered unprecedented resource access and industrial capabilities. The aliens' patterns briefly accelerated, then slowed to a standstill before resuming their normal pace. The presentations continued for hours. Advanced technology. Medical breakthroughs. Unlimited resources. Political alliances. Each offer more extravagant than the last. The emissary observed each presenter with its 4 unblinking eyes, occasionally shifting its posture but offering no feedback. In the observation room, Emmett made careful notes. While others tracked the alien's words, he documented its subtle reactions, the speed of its surface patterns, slight postural adjustments, the intensity of the bioluminescence. After the African Union's presentation on sustainable development partnerships, Dr. Nakamura touched Emmett's shoulder. The committee wants your assessment. In the secure conference room, faces turned to him expectantly. General Okafor of the UN Security Forces spoke first. Give us your read, Professor. Emmett sighed. None of the proposals have generated positive response patterns. Based on the physiological markers we can interpret, the emissary seems disappointed. Disappointed? The Swedish Prime Minister frowned. We've offered it everything: technology, resources, knowledge. Perhaps that's the problem, Emmett said quietly. We're treating this like a transaction. Offering what we value most, assuming the emissary values the same things. What would you suggest? Dr. Nakamura asked. Emmett hesitated. I'd like to make a presentation. The room erupted in objections. He was an observer, not an official representative. He had no political authority, no resources to offer. Precisely why it should be me, Emmett countered. I represent nothing but human curiosity. After heated debate, desperation won out. With each rejection, the committee grew more fearful that the emissary would leave without granting the mysterious exchange. Emmett was given 15 minutes to prepare. He requested only 2 items, a small potted plant from his university office and his grandfather's wooden flute. When Emmett entered the presentation chamber, the emissary's patterns briefly accelerated, the first such reaction to a presenter's entrance. Emmett approached slowly, without the entourage of advisors and security that had accompanied previous delegates. I bring no grand offers, Emmett began simply. No technology, no resources, no political alliances. The alien's patterns shifted, developing a new rhythm. Instead, I brought this. He placed the small pot on the table between them. Inside was a single plant, a Venus flytrap. This is a carnivorous plant from our world. It evolved a unique mechanism to survive in poor soil conditions. It's one of millions of evolutionary solutions on our planet. The emissary moved closer, its patterns pulsing with increased luminosity. And this, Emmett continued, lifting the wooden flute, belonged to my grandfather, who was Anishinaabe, indigenous to this continent. He taught me that understanding comes from listening to all voices, not just the loudest. He played a simple melody, haunting and ancient. The emissary's patterns synchronized with the rhythm of the music, flowing in harmony with each note. When the song ended, Emmett said, "My offer is simple, honest exchange. Not of power or resources, but of understanding. We are a young species with much to learn, but also with unique perspectives to share." For the first time since its arrival, the emissary spoke without being asked a direct question. You are the first to offer what we actually seek, it said, its patterns forming complex, rapid sequences. The others showed only what they wish to gain. You show what makes your species worthy of knowing. The room fell silent. In the observation chamber, officials and representatives watched in disbelief. Return tomorrow, the emissary said. Alone. We will begin the exchange. As Emmett departed, the alien added one final statement, bring more music. In the debriefing room, chaos erupted. What had Reeves offered that they hadn't? Why had the alien responded to such a simple presentation when it had rejected the combined wealth and knowledge of human civilization? Emmett sat quietly as the arguments raged around him. He knew what tomorrow would bring, the beginning of something profound. Not because he had offered the emissary anything of material value, but because he had approached it with the one thing the others had forgotten in their grand proposals: humanity. Understanding and connection. Night fell over New Montreal as security teams established new protocols for Professor Emmett Reeves's private audience with the emissary. In his temporary quarters, Emmett sat by the window, his grandfather's flute in his lap, watching distant stars emerge above the city's glow. The same stars that had guided him through childhood camping trips in the northern wilderness now took on new meaning. One of those distant points of light might be the home of their visitor. His secure phone chimed. General Okafor's stern voice came through without preamble: "The committee has concerns about your unsupervised meeting." "I'm sure they do," Emmett replied, his fingers tracing the carved patterns on the flute. "They want you wired. Full surveillance package." Emmett shook his head, though the general couldn't see it. "That would violate the trust we've established. The emissary will detect any technology." "This isn't a request, Professor. Humanity's future could." "Exactly why I won't risk alienating our visitor," Emmett interrupted. "Tell the committee I'll provide a full report afterward. Nothing more." He ended the call before Okafor could object further. From his bag, Emmett retrieved several small objects: a piece of volcanic rock from Hawaii, a vial of water from Lake Superior, a photograph of his late wife Josephine with their daughter Nadia at the Grand Canyon, and a small leather-bound journal filled with his observations of the night sky spanning decades. These weren't diplomatic gifts in any traditional sense. They were fragments of a life lived in wonder, touchstones of his personal connection to Earth and humanity. At dawn, Emmett approached the alien craft alone, carrying only these items and his flute in a simple canvas bag. The security perimeter parted reluctantly at his approach. Scientists and officials watched from their stations, monitoring equipment humming anxiously as if the machines themselves were curious. The emissary waited beside its vessel, its surface patterns flowing in slow, deliberate sequences. When Emmett stopped a few meters away, the alien extended its upper limb in a gesture that mirrored human greeting. "You've come as requested," it said, its translated voice smoother than the previous day. "Without their surveillance devices." Emmett nodded. "Trust requires vulnerability. A concept many species never grasp." The emissary's patterns briefly flashed with golden light. "Come inside." The seam in the craft widened, revealing an interior unlike anything Emmett had imagined. The walls flowed like liquid mercury, constantly reshaping themselves. What seemed like stars moved within the metallic surfaces, perhaps a representation of space, or perhaps something entirely beyond human comprehension. At the center was a simple space with two curved surfaces that approximated seats. "Your physiology has been studied," the emissary explained. "You will be comfortable." Emmett sat, feeling the surface adjust perfectly to his body. "You've been observing us for some time, then?" "For 3 of your centuries." The alien's patterns formed complex spirals. "Other delegations from my civilization visited before. None deemed your species ready." "Ready for what?" "Integration into the galactic community." Emmett absorbed this revelation with surprising calmness. "And you've come to make that determination again?" "I've come to make the final assessment." The emissary's 4 eyes focused on Emmett with unnerving intensity. "Previous evaluations found humanity too volatile, too fixated on domination rather than cooperation." "And yet you're still here," Emmett observed. "Something made you reconsider." The alien's patterns shifted to a deep blue. "Music. Art. Philosophy. The ways you make meaning from chaos. These aspects were previously undervalued in our assessments." Emmett reached into his bag and brought out the flute. "Is that why you asked for more music?" Your species creates beauty without purpose beyond the creation itself. This is rare. Emmett played another melody, this one more complex than the day before. Within the craft, the sound resonated differently, as if the walls themselves were amplifying and enriching each note. The emissary's patterns danced in perfect synchronization. When the song ended, Emmett shared the items he had brought, explaining the volcanic rock's formation over millennia, the significance of freshwater to Earth's ecosystems, the emotional connection captured in the photograph, and the personal history recorded in his journal. The emissary received each with careful attention, its patterns shifting subtly with each new understanding. These objects hold meaning beyond their physical properties, it observed. They tell the story of connection, Emmett explained. To the planet, to each other, to time itself. It's how we make sense of existence. The other delegates offered power. Resources. Knowledge already possessed. None offered meaning. The aliens' patterns formed a complex mandala-like structure. This is what we seek in potential member species, the capacity to create significance beyond survival. Emmett leaned forward. You mentioned an exchange. What does that entail? Not technology, as your leaders hope. Not weapons or energy sources. The emissary's patterns shifted to a warm, pulsing gold. We offer perspective, connection to civilizations that have existed for millions of your years, each with unique ways of perceiving reality. Knowledge, then. Understanding. The universe is vast beyond comprehension, Professor Reeves. No single species can perceive more than a fragment of its nature. Together, we experience more of the whole. Emmett thought of his late wife Josephine, an anthropologist who had dedicated her life to preserving indigenous knowledge systems. How often she had said that humanity's greatest loss was the disappearance of unique ways of seeing the world. That's why you found value in my offer, Emmett realized. Because I wasn't offering you something to take, but a different way of seeing. Precisely. The emissary rose, its form seeming to expand slightly. Your political leaders offered what would benefit humanity. Your corporations offered what would benefit themselves. You offered what makes humanity unique, your perspective on existence. Outside the craft, officials watched anxiously as hours passed. Inside, time seemed different as Emmett and the emissary continued their exchange. The professor shared human poetry, described music from cultures across Earth, explained how different human philosophies approached the fundamental questions of existence. In return, the emissary revealed glimpses of other worlds, species that experience time backward, civilizations built by collective consciousness, beings that perceive 12 dimensions as naturally as humans perceive 3. Your species stands at a crucial threshold, the emissary explained. You have developed technology capable of destroying your biosphere, yet your social structures remain fragmented. This combination has eliminated many potential member species. We're working on it, Emmett said with a wry smile. Slowly. The committee outside expects me to return with technological marvels or cosmic secrets, he added after a moment of silence. What should I tell them? The emissary's patterns formed complex interconnected webs. Tell them humanity has been accepted for preliminary integration. Over the next 50 years, we will establish gradual cultural exchange before full technological sharing begins. They won't be satisfied with that timeline. The dissatisfaction itself is part of what humanity must overcome. The aliens' patterns shifted to a gentle, undulating rhythm. Species that demand immediate gratification rarely survive first contact. As their conversation drew to a close, the emissary presented Emmett with a small crystalline object that fit in his palm. This contains navigational coordinates for the nearest exchange outpost, and basic principles of interspecies communication. When your global governance achieves true unification, not through domination but through cooperation, activate this device. And until then, continue creating music, art, stories, philosophy. Continue expanding the ways your species makes meaning from existence. This is your greatest contribution to the cosmic community. When Emmett finally emerged from the craft hours later, he was met by a wall of demands. Officials, scientists, and military personnel surrounded him, all asking variations of the same questions. What technology did they offer? What weapons? What energy sources? What advantage over other nations? Emmett stood silent for a long moment, the crystalline device hidden in his pocket, the weight of humanity's future in his understanding. The emissary has accepted humanity for eventual membership in the galactic community, he announced finally. Not because of our technological achievements or resource wealth, but because of our capacity to create meaning, through art, music, literature, and philosophy. Disbelief rippled through the crowd. That's it? General Okafor demanded. No technology transfer. No defense systems. Those will come, Emmett replied calmly, when we prove we're ready for them. When we demonstrate that we can unify our planet without coercion, that we can extend the same respect to other species that we demand for ourselves. Behind him, the emissary emerged from its craft. The crowd fell silent. Professor Reeves speaks the truth, it announced, its translated voice carrying across the plaza. What humanity offers the galactic community cannot be measured in physical resources or technological advancement. It is your unique perspective, your art, your music, your endless questioning of existence itself. The aliens' patterns formed their most complex configuration yet, a symphony of light and motion that seemed to encode meanings beyond human comprehension. When we evaluate species for integration, we do not seek what they can give us. We seek what they are that no other species has ever been. Humanity's gift is meaning-making in the face of cosmic indifference. This is rarer and more valuable than any technology. With these words, the emissary returned to its craft. The seam sealed behind it, and the teardrop vessel began to shimmer, becoming translucent and then transparent before vanishing entirely. In the silence that followed, Emmett felt the weight of the crystalline device in his pocket, a promise and a challenge. He knew the political fallout would be immense. Nations would bicker over what should have been offered, corporations would scramble to interpret the aliens' message for profit, and the public would divide between those who saw opportunity and those who saw threat. But he also knew that somewhere in that chaos, musicians would continue creating songs, artists would paint new visions, writers would craft stories about the stars, and philosophers would question the nature of existence itself. And in doing so, they would be preparing humanity for its true place in the cosmos, not as conquerors or traitors, but as meaning-makers in an indifferent universe. As dawn broke over New Montreal, Emmett Reeves looked up at the sky where the emissary had disappeared. He took out his grandfather's flute and played a simple melody that carried across the quiet plaza, a reminder of what had made humanity worthy of the stars.